This video is sponsored by Skillshare. If I had to list my 3 favorite heist movies of all time, 1 would be Jackie Brown, 2 would be How to Steal $1 Million, and 3 would be Set It Off. Set It Off is the 1996 heist crime drama directed by F. Gary Gray, which is very hard to say once you've been drinking a bunch of spiked Arnold Palmers. The film tells the story of Frankie, Stoney, Cleo, and TT, 4 women who decide to commit a series of bank robberies in order to better their lives, get paid, and in the case of Frankie, get revenge on her former employers for screwing her over. Coming from the era of 90s black cinema, Set It Off has remained relevant and important due to its female cast, excellent script, emotional resonance, and the tear-inducing brutality of its ending. Often when a film comes out and it features women in leading roles, there's a lot of discussion about, is this or is it not a feminist film?
I think women can do anything.
And I want to use Set It Off to explain what I think a feminist film looks like, why I think Set It Off is said film, and how it uses so many different aspects to illustrate issues that are key to making a film even remotely feminist. In order to do this, it is important that I explain then what I think feminism is. And so to quote Bell Hooks, feminism is a struggle to end sexist oppression. Therefore, it is necessarily a struggle to eradicate the ideology of domination that permeates Western culture on various levels, as well as a commitment to reorganizing society so that the self-development of people can take precedence over imperialism, economic expansion, and material desires. Sounds good to me. As someone who spent most of their childhood indoors and reading like a poorer version of Rory Gilmore, all of the skills I've acquired outside of school were self-taught and came with a lot of labor of hobbling things together, which is why I'm so pleased to be sponsored by Skillshare. Becoming a full-time video essayist was not something that was in the cards for me, but since I've been doing it, Skillshare has become one of the places that I have gone to help find advice about the things that I am definitely still learning how to do, like sound, and other skills like marketing and productivity that have helped make this career choice possible. Outside of work, I have, and this is a little embarrassing, but I have been using it to learn how to sew and create foam items because I want to cosplay Kaya from Magic the Gathering because I think it would be fun. So I have been using Skillshare to help me learn how to use foam. It has become my one-stop shop for all of the sort of like crafty projects that I never thought I would be able to do. I never thought I'd be able to do without going into a classroom, but now I can do it from home in between watching Survivor, which is a thing that I do now. So when I'm looking for advice on anything from project and time management to how to make foam swords, which is something that I want to do really, really badly, I go to Skillshare, and they have not let me down. The first 1,000 people to use the link down below will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare, and I gotta say, I highly recommend it. As if there is any sort of crafty thing that you are trying to do, because I know everyone's like career, job opportunity, that's great, but we also need to think of things that will not be labor required, and so I want to use Skillshare to cosplay, and I encourage all of you to do the same. But sewing, drawing, getting into something that you've always wanted to do and never had the time to go out and do or want to fit between other assignments, Skillshare allows you the flexibility to make all of those crafty, joyful dreams come true. Because yes, it's great for career pivoting, but it's also great for finding a new skill that brings you joy in between everything else.
Lately, and it's been disturbing me, is that if feminism is all things to all people, then what is it? I mean, how do we locate it as a radical political movement in our lives?
So a heist or a caper film, if you're feeling jazzy, it exists within the crime genre where the film focuses on the planning, execution, and aftermath of said caper. Something got caped. Some familiar tropes connected to this are spending a good chunk of time bringing the team together or introducing all the team members. There's usually a love interest to whomever is the most sympathetic or close to getting out member of the team. And it usually ends with one last job that tends to be where the body count happens. It is through this genre lens that Set It Off tells its story. During the beginning of the film, we see Frankie. Frankie is a teller at a bank that is being robbed, and during it, someone is shot in front of her, which makes her reactions very delayed. In the fight or flight situation, she frighted hard. Because she knows one of the robbers, Darnell, from the projects where they both live, she is implicated as being part of the crime without evidence and is fired from the bank.
How do we know you're not in collusion?
Collusion? Let me tell you something. I am here at 8:20 sharp every morning. I work my ass off until quitting time. Yesterday, I counted $240,000 by hand for you. That's how you should know.
Her childhood friends, Cleo, TT, and Stoney, get her a job at Luther's janitorial services together. And it sucks.
You didn't empty the cans in 104. I'm docking your pay.
Come on now, that ain't right.
What who you supposed to be? Goddamn mighty morphin' fucking Power Ranger?
At their job, their boss, Luther, is a vulgar, sexist, homophobic piece of shit who pays them poorly and also shows little emotion for the situations that they are in, especially TT, who has a young son, and Cleo, being a outward butch lesbian, is misgendered by him and treated very patronizingly due to it.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
It is Cleo, the self-proclaimed hood rat of the group, who decides that they should rob a bank themselves using Frankie's insider knowledge. Frankie, of course, is ready to burn everything to the ground and agrees. TT and Stoney are the holdouts. This changes, however, when a case of mistaken identity gets Stoney's brother murdered by the police, and TT's son is taken away from her by CPS because he was at work with her and accidentally got into some chemicals.
He shouldn't have been at the workplace with you.
Well, I didn't have a choice. I don't have money for a babysitter.
Well, now you're gonna have to prove that you can take care of him.
Now that money seems to be the only option for escaping this trap of poverty that they are in, the four start casing banks. Stoney meets her love interest, Blair Underwood, who is at one of his most fine in this film. And after a series of successful bank jobs, they have enough money that they can make their great exodus to Mexico or wherever they decide to go. So, with victory at the precipice, so close, so tangible, something has to go wrong. The women decide to hide the money in an air vent at their job site, but it is discovered by Luther, who spends it all on drugs and sex workers. As you do, I guess. And the girls, Sam, Stoney, confront Luther, and he pulls a gun on Cleo. TT shoots him, and now not only have they robbed banks, but they have now committed murder. Money gone, they gotta go on one last job. And being a heist movie, one last job is where shit gets rocked. They take too long at the bank, and of course this is the bank where Stoney's love interest, Keith, works, so she gotta call him, be like, babe, time to pull clerks and just don't come into work today. TT ends up getting shot as the women attempt to surrender, but one mall cop decides to go ham, shoots her, and there ends up being a complete shooting spree. TT dies in Stoney's arms and they decide to split up. Cleo leads the cops on a speed chase and refuses to surrender, choosing to go out in a blaze of glory to give her friends some chance of escaping. And if you haven't gotten emotional yet when you watch this movie, this scene with Queen Latifah is like the moment where I always start to bawl. Frankie is shot by the police after she confronts police officer Dr. Cox, who is partly responsible for the inciting incident of putting her on this path by perpetuating this idea that she was a criminal before she did anything criminal at all.
Stop now! What's the procedure? You're being robbed.
What's the fucking procedure when you got a gun at your head?
only Stoney manages to survive and escape on a tour bus to Mexico. She symbolically cuts her hair, calls Keith one last time, and tries to make a new life for herself without the love of everyone she ever knew. Feminist film theory is a very loaded, multifaceted issue, so not going to cover all of it today. And the other issue that comes into it when you research a lot of, feminist film critics is that half of them all went to Berkeley or some other University of California school, or are British, and therefore we cannot trust them at this very moment in time. But a lot of it is really discussing what is the purpose of the women on screen, what are their journeys, what are their stories, and how are they being presented. And that idea always gets wrapped up in the concept of gaze.
Do you know these gays?
You have likely been overexposed to terms like the male gaze and the female gaze. The concept of gaze goes back to, most people consider philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, who came up with the concept of the gaze or le regard, the way in which the way you view something projects power and class. And the male gaze itself was a concept that was dubbed by art critic John Berger, who in Ways of Seeing talked about this in the subject of classical Western art.
I don't want to deny the crucial part that seeing plays in sexuality, but there's a great difference between being seen as oneself naked or seeing another in that way and a body being put on display. To be naked is to be without disguise. To be on display is to have the surface of one's own skin, the hairs of one's own body, turned into a disguise which cannot be discarded.
It was then Laura Mulvaney in her 1975 essay, Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema, that took the term and transposed it into film studies, where we have been debating what is not the male gaze ever since. And when we talk about gaze, framing in many ways, we were talking about how the camera is being used to depict power or remove power, of being the crafter of culture and a reflection of cultural ideas. Black women on screen have had to deal with the dualities of the male gaze and the white gaze.
These gays, they're trying to murder me.
No matter what kind of story you're telling, it matters of getting the right person behind the camera. And Gary Gray was the right person to be behind the camera. He got his start in music videos, most notably It Was a Good Day by Ice Cube, Black Hand Side by Queen Latifah, Waterfalls for TLC. Gary Gray has the ability, when the script is good, and we have to give him grace for Men in Black International because he wanted to leave, and he also knows how to film women in a way that doesn't inherently have to be dismissive or depowering. We get a lot of shots of the four leads just being together, and they have an easy chemistry that would make you believe that not only are these women good friends, but they have known each other for a while. There is a comfort and naturalness within the way that they move. Even during the fully consensual sex scene, it is very slow and reverent and intimate rather than voyeuristic. In fact, the traditional sexiest moment we have between two people is between Cleo and her girlfriend Ursula. And while there's an argument to be made about the way that, we sexualize lesbians, it is worth noting that we do not sexualize lesbian relationships that look like this, that are between a butch woman who is big, who is not presenting herself for the male gaze, and her girlfriend. That's not what we prioritize when we prioritize this hypersexualization of lesbian women. If you can somehow hear purring, it's because my cat is right underneath my chair. While an ensemble, the lead is definitely Stoney, which makes sense because Jada Pinkett was on an upward trajectory. She's the one who wants to get out of the hood, who wants to leave home because she has nothing left to lose. From her introduction, we see that despite being young, the death of her parents forced Stoney at only 25 at most to take on the responsibility of mothering and guiding her young brother. Of course, being poor and on a fixed income, that resulted in her working jobs that are purely physical, giving up on her own aspirations for college.
Well, I worked really hard to keep a roof over me and my brother's head and keep clothes on our back. And I planned on sending him to college.
That's great. Then he should go to college. He'll go on and accomplish tremendous things and be great and wonderful, like his sister.
He's dead.
When she realizes that her brother won't be able to attend school because he didn't get a scholarship, in one really gutting scene, she
forces herself to have sex with an older man who you can get the implication has been creeping on her for way too long of a time. And for any young girl who has been adultified by an adult man, this scene is triggering in multiple ways.
In a scene between Stoney and Cleo, where Stoney asks Cleo where she sees herself in 5 years, Cleo says the following.
I don't know. And I don't care.
The interesting thing about her relationship with Blair Underwood's character is that it's not just a romantic storyline. It's a way of illustrating the class and financial dynamics that have shaped the ability of Stoney to do more with her life. Class is a huge part of Set It Off for that very reason. When we meet Frankie in the bank, we know that this is a white higher-end banking institution from where it's located, the way it's staffed, and who owns it. Frankie's job there represents a sense of some class mobility through respectability and the hope for something upward. But then the circumstances of her race and area code offer her no protection when Officer Dr. Cox decides that she must have had something to do with the robbery because they were from the projects, she's from the projects. Therefore, she's tainted by that.
Can you believe after working at that damn bank for 2 years, I can't even get a recommendation for another job?
And in true ACAB fashion, there is a black female cop who offers zero solidarity to Frankie or any of the other female characters and just kind of goes along with what her white officer says.
They didn't even bother to ask me if I was thirsty, sister.
Cleo is a butch lesbian and a self-proclaimed proud hood rat. She has no desire to conform to any kind of respectability politics.
Stoney, you can go to suburbia and start a new life. You never hood rats. I can live with that. You can't. Hood is where I belong.
And while her girlfriend Ursula doesn't speak, iconically doesn't speak.
The fuck is up with that? She don't talk. Oh, really?
Their relationship is affectionate, sexual, and loving in the moments that we do see them. Like, their relationship is not fetishized. And I think it's important to know that this film takes place in the early 90s. Like, it came out in 1996. And therefore, it came out before Ellen DeGeneres came out on her show. And I know we don't fuck with Ellen anymore, but I think it's important to understand that, like, that was a huge moment in sort of the broader mainstream public seeing a lesbian. It was the first time Queen Latifah played a gay woman, and for those who may not have known, for years there was speculation about whether or not Queen Latifah was a lesbian, and she came out on her own terms in 2021, as is her right, after decades of speculation, much like how Raven-Symoné, for years, people speculated about her sexuality.
Ebony, my love. Rebel, my love. Peace. Happy Pride.
It's also important that the same year that this movie came out, DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, the federal law that banned federal recognition of same-sex marriage by limiting the definition of marriage between one man and one woman, signed into law by Bill Clinton himself. This is not a safe world for Cleo. Cleo doesn't have the ability to code switch and doesn't want to. And I think it's important as well that she doesn't want to change who she is for society. TT gets the least amount of background, but as a single mother of a small son and no family in the picture, we can see that all the responsibility of childcare has laid on her shoulders. The baby's always with her until he is taken by ACS. And that itself kind of tells you all you need to know about TT's existence. She is literally permanently tethered to her child, who she has to watch because she cannot afford to pay anyone to do so. And because she cannot afford to pay anyone to watch her child, she cannot go seek out opportunities that would better her or her child's life. Therefore, it's this vicious cycle. She gets her child taken away because she can't take care of her child. And because she has to take care of her child, she never makes enough money. And so it just keeps going on and on and on until we find ourselves robbing banks. During a rooftop scene, they talk about a factory in the area that just recently closed.
40 started laying people off. They was paying folks $15 an hour at that place.
Man, that's good money.
Yeah, no, that's overtime be like $22.50 an hour.
I don't know what I'm gonna do. Now that Luther's taking taxes out my check, I'm making half as much as I used to.
And that's $15 an hour in 1996 money. Adjusted for inflation, that's almost $30 an hour, girl. Like, that's money. The limitations facing each woman isn't just gender. It's the compounding intersections of poverty, single motherhood, homophobia, and adultification, all while being Black.
The mistake made by mainstream feminism and its continued reliance on categorical representations of women. As soon as one assumes that women can be categorically represented, it means that there is some clandestine racialization happening there. Right.
In 1991, Ridley Scott's Thelma Louise was released, starring Susan Sarandon as Louise and Gina Davis as Thelma. Two best friends decide to go on a road trip together. During the trip, Thelma is sexually assaulted, and the would-be rapist is shot and killed by Louise after he makes a comment, after he makes a disgusting comment once he is stopped from being able to complete his act. They decide to flee, embarking on a criminal journey that eventually ends with the two women deciding to drive into the Grand Canyon together rather than be taken by police. It is an excellent film and is so layered, and every time I rewatch it makes me cry, because there's nothing more that I love than two best friends doing crime together. Thelma and Louise is an excellent film, and in a lot of ways it is the Betty Friedan to Set It Off's Bell Hooks, which I'm sorry to you, Thelma and Louise, because truly you don't deserve that much, but it makes sense in the way that Bell Hooks' feminist theory is taking aspects of what was important about the feminine mystique and reapplying it to fit the places in which that text was not thinking about its gaze about who needed feminism and who empowerment was for. Thelma and Louise focuses more so on women who have the option of leisure, and that leisure is destroyed by the sexual violence of the white male patriarchy once they're trying to have a good time. Louise herself is a survivor of rape and spends the majority of the film avoiding Texas due to her own fears of what happened there.
We ought to tell the police.
Tell him what, Thelma? Just what do you think we should tell him, huh?
I don't know. Just tell them what happened.
Which part?
That he was raping me.
Just about 100 goddamn people saw you dancing cheek to cheek with him all night. Who's gonna believe that we don't live in that kind of a world, Thelma? God damn it, pull over.
At the beginning of the movie, they don't have perfect lives. Thelma's husband is controlling and Louise's boyfriend is gone half the time, but they're not financially unstable. They are not lacking in anything except maybe that spark of joy, that, you know, the thing that has no name. That is their biggest concern at the beginning of the film. They aren't needing to sell their bodies in order to provide for their families. They're not completely stuck. The entire road trip happens because they want to have a break from their lives, and that escapism is what is destroyed. That ability to escape is put in jeopardy by a man who believes he has the ability to take something from Thelma because she danced with him one time. As feminist writer Rita Mae Brown wrote in The Last Straw, class is much more than Marx's definition of relationship to means of production. Class involves your behavior, your assumptions about life, your experience determined by your class, validates those assumptions, how you are taught to behave, what you expect from yourself and from others, your concept of a future, how you understand problems and solve them, how you think, feel, act. It is these behavioral patterns that middle-class women resist recognizing, although they may be perfectly willing to accept class in Marxist terms, a neat trick that helps them avoid really dealing with class behavior and changing that behavior in themselves. It is these behavioral patterns which must be recognized, understood, and changed. Much like everything in within the early feminist movement, films like Thelma and Louise are absolutely groundbreaking and influential, and criticizing the things that it leaves out is not criticizing criticizing the fact that the movie exists. And I think that's always an issue when you discuss and compare texts that are in conversation with each other. I am not saying any of this to dismiss what Thelma Louise is. Talking about what it isn't is also important. There is something to be said about the untapped potential of sex and freedom that exists within this class of women, within women who do have options but still feel limited by the patriarchy. That is important. It is also important to highlight who is included within that patriarchal sense of oppression and how framing patriarchal oppression only in that way is limiting. While white feminism is often criticized as the mainstreamification of the movement and being a branding tool, that same criticism doesn't often do the work of recentering other women, because to a certain degree we have to, and I mean, general we and you, I'm not saying you, I'm not saying ye, just so you know, the you asterisk is because we asterisk want feminism to be marketed well. If it's queer in a fun way, but that doesn't isolate from the idea of the male gaze. It's why people would rather speculate on the sexuality of someone like Taylor Swift, who is Tumblr sapphic at best, while queer women of color artists like Khalida, or people who are heterosexual but play with that same imagery like FKA Twigs, are put into a box. Non-binary actor Mason Alexander Park tweeted fairly recently about how, as a Mexican and indigenous non-binary actor, they're not given the same consideration or platformed in the same way as other white non-binary people. We sanitize everything to meet the closest to the margins of respectability. And I think that's what makes Set It Off to be such an interesting, compelling pairing to the way that we talked about feminist empowerment in the 90s. You think about the year that Thelma Louise came out. You also had Silence of the Lambs. Jodie Foster was in The Accused before. We very much use sexual violence and the fear of sexual violence and the way in which that predatory nature of men is the shorthand to which we have used to explore the way in which women are traumatized and harmed by the patriarchy. But I think it's often important to realize that the patriarchy is not just one man, one bad husband, one bad boyfriend, one group of unsettling men at SantaCon. That to explore that in film is to talk about class, to talk about power, to talk about, and my cat's using the litter box. I'm trying to talk about Marxism. And I think it's especially true for a lot of women of color and marginalized gendered people of color, that their relationship to cis men is a lot more complicated. To quote from Bell Hooks again, women in lower class and poor groups, particularly those who are non-white, would not have defined women's liberation as women gaining social equality with men, since they are continually reminded in their everyday lives that all women do not share the same social status. Concurrently, they know that many males in their social groups are exploited and oppressed. Knowing that men in their groups do not have social, political, and economic power, they would not deem it liberatory. One of the complex things about being a woman of color is being face to face with a patriarchy that is, in some way, your ally in racial liberation, but has also inherited and absorbed the traditional patriarchy. This desire to protect our boys from becoming men too soon, of wanting to keep the men that we love out of trouble, of wanting to protect the community, but also having that desire to protect all of us be weaponized into silence against harm. There aren't many pivotal black men in the film. There's Stoney's brother, who ends up set up for death by his own friend, a victim of sort of like hood solidarity. Luther is the abusive tyrant who employs the girls. The exception of sort of like the good black man in this film is Blair Underwood's character, Keith. He's portrayed as a loving, kind, and empathetic partner, but it's also important he is the only person in the movie who has achieved something beyond working class satisfaction. He went to Harvard.
When I was in New York, I was working on Wall Street. And before that, B school.
B school?
Business school, I'm sorry.
I wanted to go to business school.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
What, financing, marketing?
No, typing and bookkeeping.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that not professional enough?
It's just hard for me to believe that you're this hard when you're so beautiful.
He's happy to tour the hood with Stoney one date and then bring her to like a fancy gala the next. He can give her luxury and comfort because he has economic security and freedom to do that. He's probably been to therapy. He's probably read bell hooks. He probably gets it because he's had the social and economic freedom to do so. Stoney's brother rejects the idea of going to college is not for him, despite knowing that sacrifices were made to help him go to college.
Stoney, you know how long you told me that I had to go to college? Well, I'm sorry, but maybe that life is just not for me.
When so much of the way that you feel that you can move in the world is relying on where you were born and who was giving you opportunities and how many people around you were uplifting you, that plays a big deal. I mean, Stoney's brother is killed by a cop because his friend sets him up to be murdered. When that is friendship, when that is your solidarity, how will you ever become the Blair Underwood? Sendedorf's feminism comes from the battle that women and other people of marginalized genders wage against class, against capitalism, against respectability, against the limitations of poverty with a palpable anger, a palpable hopelessness. It is the war story of 4 women with no real future, except for the one that they have to desperately claw for themselves. And before anyone starts, this is not me saying that robbing banks is a feminist act. I would never say that publicly. Also, robbing banks is overall a high risk, low reward kind of crime. You would be better off doing what the white tech bros do and just invent a crypto scam or join an MLM. Like, it's not worth it. They don't really keep money there.
Inclusion is not enough. Diversity is not enough. And as a matter of fact, we do not wish to be included in a racist society. If we say no to heteropatriarchy, then we do not want to be assimilated into a misogynist and heteropatriarchal society. If we say no to poverty, we do not want to be contained by a capitalist structure that values profits more than human beings.
Feminism in film gets used as marketing, as a tool to encourage you that the film starring 3 thin actresses, as talented as they may be, is somehow more worthy of your time than anything else. Even if we look at some of the most recent films that have had feminism as part of their marketing, Don't Worry Darling, Booksmart, Charlie's Angels, Captain Marvel, Wonder Woman, etc., what do most of them have to say about the experiences of women who fit outside the margins of respectability? Even if you were to say with Booksmart, the fact that there is a lesbian teen lead. It is a lesbian who is a young, attractive girl dating another young, attractive girl. In Bell Hooks' feminist theory, she quotes from the essay, The Unhappy Marriage of Marxism and Feminism, Can It Be Saved? And says, feminism seems more and more to have taken on a blind, safe, non-revolutionary outlook as feminist radicalism loses ground to bourgeoisie feminism. We cannot let this continue. Women need to know, and are increasingly prevented from finding out, that feminism is not about dressing for success, or becoming a corporate executive, or gaining elective office. It is not being able to share a 2-career marriage and take skiing vacations and spend huge amounts of time with your husband and 2 lovely children because you have a domestic worker who makes all this possible for you. But who hasn't the time or money to do it for herself? It's not opening a woman's bank or spending a weekend in an expensive workshop that guarantees to teach you how to become assertive but not aggressive. Not about becoming a police detective or CIA agent or Marine Corps general. We need films that understand that empowerment is not feminism. That feminism isn't just having a group of women who look good on camera. That is just cool. is about addressing the social ills that force people into situations using narrative as a way to create empathy, to explore those things without it being an essay. Not once does Set It Off need to sit down and tell you, okay, so there's this thing called gentrification. It just tells you the story of people who are complete human beings living in that experience. And because it is made with a consciousness of what that experience looks like and what it does to people, it can elevate the material itself to not just another heist film, but one that really hits at the collective ennui of an entire group of marginalized women and other kinds within that group. That is what feminist film is meant to do, to create a catharsis that even when it is sad, is delivering something that feels real, that feels groundable, something that you could take to any person and they could feel the same thing, not because it's a universal story that has no meat to it, but because it translates something so key into art. In order to create truly feminist works, we need to be writing stories that do more than just take beautiful white people and light-skinned folks of the moment and make them cry in the face of the patriarchy of one man. In fact, the biggest sin against Set It Off is that it features no dark-skinned women in it. It is telling the stories of more kinds of people, centering the hopes and dreams and bodies of different kinds of women and marginalized genders, of not worshiping the idea that one exceptional person is the key, and embracing the idea that together we could be stronger if we just worked beyond uplifting one Wonder Woman.
Is that a Cabernet or a Merlot?
Damn.
Thank you guys so much. Ow, plant. Bad Momo. I love you. I'm sorry. I'm a bad plant mom. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. I apologize that it has been a slow march. It has not been a good mental time for you girls. Struggling mentally, but I'm back in therapy, so can only go up. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. And also, we still have pins. We still have Monster Fucker and Villain Fucker pins up for sale. Half of the proceeds are going to the Okra Project. Really excited about that. They should be shipping out in April. Also, this video is going to come out on the 31st, so in 7 days, it'll be my birthday. I will be 31 years young, and I'm really excited about it, overall. Yeah, thank you so much for supporting me. We have reached 200,000 subscribers, which I can't believe it. It's so cool. I always in such a depressive spiral. I almost missed it, but I did it. So huzzah. And yeah, I just feel really grateful and happy and thankful for the opportunity to keep doing this. I am really working to be in a much better headspace because I want to create more, want to finish working on my big projects, want to keep delivering to you content that I feel proud of. And again, we don't try to dream of labor, but we do want to dream of success, of creating something that is meaningful. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it gave you a little bit of meaning today, and just be kind to yourselves and each other.